The motion carries 3-0. Moving on to number 2, general public comment. Mm-hmm.
But that's not coming through the mic, and so I don't know if
Okay.
the recording will pick you guys up.
Okay.
And I need to have
The mic's on. I don't know if I just need to lean closer. Okay, cool.
Yeah, there
Great.
you go. Mine was not on, I'm sorry.
Okay, we have the first item approved 3-0. Approval of the minutes, continuation of the treasurer's quarterly report. I don't see anybody here for public comments, so we'll move on to item number 3, which is Woodland Davis Clean and Water Agency General Manager update and Operations Manager update.
Hi, good afternoon. So I will start and turn it over to Stan, so we both have an opportunity to speak today. Our usual topics: water supply outlet, capital improvements, projects, and then our operations update. First, kind of look at water supply. Term 91 graphic, you're all familiar with this graphic. This Term 91 curtailment is in effect when the state and the federal projects are releasing supplemental water to meet water quality objectives in the Delta, and that's currently the case. So whenever this graph, the solid dark line is current water year. Every day the graph is updated. And when it's in the kind of red or pink color, that means Term 91 can or should be in effect. When it's in blue, it could not be in effect. So it has been trending down, but we're still definitely in Term 91 territory. They are releasing some extra water right now for what they call X2 to meet certain, there's really salinity in the Delta, and that's probably going to continue for some time yet. I'm not quite sure how much longer. So expectation is Term 91 curtailment will remain in effect for some time.
You said what's in the Delta?
They call it X2. Yeah, they manage salinity in the Delta. There's a monitoring station in the Delta where they have to meet a certain amount of salinity. And in certain year types, and this is one of them, they release extra water to manage that differently. That's the extent of my knowledge on that topic.
I drive the river road quite a bit, and I'm amazed at how high the Sacramento River is. So
Yep.
they're just flushing tons of water through there.
Yep, it's apparent in the next graphic. So this one is, one too many times. This is Lake Oroville. So the top of the shaded area is the average for over many years. And then the darker blue line is the daily storage capacity in Oroville. You can kind of see it did get, May, June this year, it did get completely full. But then they've been releasing water at rather fast pace ever since that time. And they're still doing that now. So it's been dropping quite a bit, still above long-term average, but getting closer to the long-term average. And Shasta's pretty similar. It got nearly full this spring, and it's been kind of mainly following its more normal curve. In terms of water release, it's still a little bit above average. So we should be going into this winter with relatively healthy water storage. I want to talk real quickly about our WAPA electrical conversion. It's quite a bit of work to do this. It's a little bit more difficult than switching over cable at the house. So we're quite a few things working on. We are on track for January 1 switch over. It starts at 12:01 January 1. One thing that I do need to mention is that more than 10 years ago, the agency signed a mainline extension contract with PG&E. And that was to avoid paying for power transmission lines installed to get water to the water treatment plant itself back in 2013, 2014 that was built. The agency had agreed back then to buy power from PG&E for at least 10 years. We are leaving that a little bit before 10 years is up. It ends up around sometime in early October next year is when the 10 years is actually officially up. WAPA and I met with PG&E a few weeks ago. They will not budge on us paying them. It's kind of like an early leaving penalty of about $257,000. So we looked at it and said, well, what would happen if we stayed in PG&E until November next year or switched now? And we would end up paying PG&E around $500,000 to $600,000 more for power than we would with WAPA during that same time period. So it makes sense, as much as we hate to do it, pay PG&E the early penalty and switch to WAPA on January 1, and we have a net savings, so to speak, of between $100,000 and $300,000. There is a range there because it depends a bit on how much rainfall we get this winter. And WAPA has 3 different electric rates, depending on if it's their own hydropower generation or if they're buying power on the market. But either way, if it's a dry year or a wet year, we still save money by paying PG&E and switching on January 1. Any questions on that? I went through that real quickly. And then the next two items are basically a new
I
meter.
think we should send a check with a beautiful arrangement of dead flowers.
We can certainly do that.
I actually have 2 arrangements of dead flowers at my house.
Yeah. Yeah, we can certainly do that. And then the next two items are a new meter at the intake, and that results in the need to make an amendment to the early 2035 agreement. I'll cover that more in the actual item for that a little bit further down. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stan to talk about capital improvements.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So, like normal, going through a few capital improvements, little updates. As you're all aware, so all of the intakes have been replaced. There were 3 that were a little more aggressive to replace than the other 7. The 7 came out pretty easy, but the last 3 they basically had to remove by cutting them out. As you can see there, they cut a square out of this one, and actually the other picture of that one there is where there's 2 halves of that screen being held up. So it took them a bit to get those last 3, but they did do that. We are required to update our O&M manuals as part of this effort with the fisheries to ensure that if something should happen with the screens in the future, that we have a written plan on how we address that, how Jacobs would address that moving forward. So, but all 10 are in. They've been in for a bit now. Operations are normal. The differential between the river and the wet wells is holding very nice. All of the safeties are in place, if you will. So if that differential does increase, pumps would start shutting off, and we'd protect those screens and that infrastructure.
Stan, why did they cut the hole in the one?
So they were bowed so much that they actually had to, the divers in the water had to cut a hole in and then cut vertically the whole screen to be able to get them out where they weren't rubbing against the structure. To remove them. So basically they cut them and then we're able to remove them from the rails.
Has there been any advance in screen technology since the originals for this?
Because we basically have the exact same ones that were installed. Those were the ones that were rebuilt. Mm-hmm. Because the design takes into account your velocity going through the screens, you're not going to deviate from that between designs. As far as new intakes, there could be new engineering methods to do screens, but we built the exact same ones as previous.
Okay. I kind of wondered if we should even experiment with one of our screens. For example, something with lighter weight. Those things are massive.
They are massive, but remember, they need to be structurally solid enough to have that differential, the water and the weight of the water pressure with the differential to come through. So we actually bolstered them a little bit. That is one change they made. So to help hopefully prevent.
So they're heavier now.
They do have 1 or 2 more structural supports in the middle than previous. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oops, you did it. We're both doing it. Okay. No, you're fine. You're good. Sorry. Also, still out at the intake, we do have that, as we mentioned before, we have, roof access. Access to the screens for cleaning and maintenance has been a challenge. Obviously, the way it was constructed and designed, that's been an ongoing challenge. Jacobs is certainly looking at those still. We do have the erosion control project that has been on the books for a while. We do plan to proceed with that. RD 2035 is basically managing that and bidding on those. So, and that is with the dotted line you see there on the screen. We would be, or actually that's where the staging area would be. But you see to the south of the intake there, the grayed out area, we're going to basically be adding riprap to that area. So we'd bring it back to grade a little bit and add a riprap there to prevent erosion in the future. And then at the plant, we do talk with Jacobs on a monthly basis about a number of smaller capital projects there. And then at this point, most of those projects are improvements we've either identified based on design challenges or other impacts where Jacobs would basically install those at their cost as improvements to their design. Yep.
Didn't they have some culpability for the problems that happened with these screens? In other words, have they accepted financial responsibility?
So we have not received an invoice related to the screens at all. Our discussions with them, and we've discussed with the board previously as it was occurring. Our discussions with them were certainly that Woodqua's position it was a Jacobs issue that created those challenges, and we have not had any indication that they would be wanting to discuss payment for any of that work.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Normal slide you always see, we're running around 21 million gallons a day. Typically that would be a little more in the summer, and I'll discuss that here briefly on the next slide, why that's not the case, but we still are pushing quite a bit of water out. All the contract requirements for regulatory have been met, and as normal we post. As Tim mentioned, we're diverting under our supplemental water right, which is not a limiting factor to water at all for this summer. It started late enough that we had plenty of water rights to push full allotment to the partners. Except for we had a power interruption. So we did, due to a outside contractor accident that basically pulled down a PG&E pole, we did suffer a power loss. It did surge the plant. It did damage the surge arresters and some little bit of equipment past the surge arresters, but significant damage to the plant was avoided by the surge arresters basically taking that load. As part of that, the generator, when we were running the generator, because we did not have PG&E at the time, we did have a belt that failed. They had just actually worked on that and replaced the belt, so not sure at this point if it was a manufacturer issue with the belt or it was installed different, but the generator failed. We did, Jacobs did bring in a backup to the backup, so we did have a backup generator on site. They did hook that up and run it for about a week while they were working on the existing stationary generator, getting it up to speed. So then we did switch back to that. Off-grid, we were off-grid for about 19 days, which is significant. And then we went back on August 29th. Part of that, and that last bullet you see there, is we did experience low pressure in both cities. The city of Davis actually was a bit below 20 PSI, which is kind of a threshold number from a regulatory perspective. So there were some conversations with the board, with the state board around that. I think.
Is a surge arrestor essentially like a relay switch and a?
It's interesting. I should have put a picture of it. It's basically, think of it as a fuse that blows.
Yeah.
That's designed to take that load and take that hit, and then with minimal damage. So, but basically, it's interesting. It's just, it almost looks like a plastic. It's a bunch of plastic rings together like this, and basically it melts down and loses contact with the power line. It's basically meant just like a fuse to basically separate so that power won't continue and damage other equipment.
Okay, and it does seem like we're on a treadmill here when it comes to generators. How many generator failures have we had so far?
I'll speak to that here in a minute.
Thank you.
So, like I said, from a mitigation perspective, and I'll speak to the generators and what we're doing on that front here in a second. So, the city's distribution system, so both cities have adjusted their operations at the facility or at within their cities to mitigate challenges if Woodqua's was to go offline suddenly. As an example, City of Davis, we are running at least one of our wells at all times to ensure that we have that coming into the system, because when we lose Woodqua's here at the city, it takes about 3 to 4 minutes for a well to come on, start pumping, and then actually get water into the system. So that's and at high demand times of the year, like summer, that's a challenge. So we are running one well at all times now to help mitigate that low pressure situation. From that perspective, back to the generators. We're talking with Jacobs. I've had a number of conversations with actually the Western general manager for Jacobs that manages the entire West Coast and Western United States. We will be having from them a plan to do a forensic evaluation of the entire electrical system, which includes the generator. I do have a meeting next month with the generator vendor and the maintenance folks that manage that, because it's contracted. Jacobs folks don't do it directly. I will be talking with them directly to discuss the generator and the upkeep and why it wasn't coming on. Another component of that is it's in the electrical side. Even when the generator fires up, a couple times now we've had a relay within that system that would not allow the generator to start feeding power. I have told Jacobs, Tim has told Jacobs, that is our number one priority at this point, because we want to make sure that if that generator fires, we have that power available immediately. So that is their primary focus right now. And then in the next few months, we'll be having a plan to do a forensic analysis of the entire electrical system and what improvements may be necessary to assist with more reliable power coming in.
So have we had to replace generators, or these generators are not functioning because of the switch problem?
So both. So we did replace the generator one time. They burned up basically the first one due to a defect from the manufacturer when it came in. That was years ago. They replaced that entirely, so it was a brand new generator. And then we've had both situations where, like I said, we had a mechanical failure with the belt. The other time it ran too long and wasn't serviced, so the some of the consumable parts degraded to the point where it kicked the generator offline. And then we've also had
Replace that generator? Did you have to replace that generator?
parts within the generator. Yeah, the generator itself was fine. There were some consumable components within there that they had to maintain and replace. And then we have had the relay. Twice now, the relay has failed to allow the generator to switch over. That is honestly the most critical issue we've had that we need to address right away.
Yes, because it means you really don't have any backup.
Correct, and that is why the cities have adjusted their operation at this period of time to ensure that if Woodco was to go down and not provide water for 10, 20 minutes while the operators get out and switch the generator over.
Did you have to use diesel fuel to run that plant for those 10 days while you didn't have electricity?
Both the stationary generator and the backup to the backup that they rolled in are both diesel fired, yes.
How much fuel did we use and what did it cost?
It's roughly, I don't know about the current one, but the last time we did this, it was roughly $10,000 a day in diesel fuel.
So is there how do we recover those costs?
So
I assume you are. But.
So we have not had that discussion with Jacobs for the current effort. Previously, we did not pay for a number of those items when it failed and when components failed within Jacobs' system. This time, I'm unsure as to where we're going to land between us and Jacobs on what we recover, what we don't, what we pay, what we don't. There are some factors there where I could see Woodqua might have some of the costs based on contract language, but I certainly wouldn't see us footing the bill for the entirety of the issue.
So who's in charge of scheduling? You said there wasn't maintenance that was done on the generator, and therefore it wouldn't relay, right, or it seized up, whatever. Right? It wasn't maintained at the proper schedule.
So what happened this time? It was maintained. So what occurs is with the generators, they should be every 250 hours. One, it's either like every 6 months or quarterly. You come in, you take a look, right?
Use them, yeah.
When it's running under emergency like this, where it's going to be longer. Cullicut, who is the vendor that actually maintains it, basically every 200 to 250 hours of runtime, you need to take it down so they can service it. What happened previously when some of those consumables were not done, and basically it seized the generator. Previously, Jacobs was not aware that 250 hours was the limit for the runtime before you needed to service it. This time, the current Jacobs staff, Ken, who's the project manager, talked with us directly, said, look, we need to take it down. We need to make sure we service it because we don't want to have that same situation. So this time, completely different than the previous time. Now, the relay and the electrical components, I have been in basically very regular communication with both Ken and his area supervisor or manager. That is the main focus at this point, is to understand why that relay was not functioning, or if it functioned correctly, we need to adjust those settings to allow it to switch. And that is the current impetus of the conversations we're having now.
I'm sorry, you said it was 10 days it ran?
Ran for about 19 days this time.
19 days at
Yeah.
how many hours a day?
24/7.
So they had to take it offline after
Yeah.
200?
So what we do is we would schedule with the two cities. They would take it down. They would switch over to the other backup, right?
Got it. Okay. Yeah.
Run it while they were servicing this one. Yeah. So it was an effort and it wasn't easy. But I will say the communication with the current Jacobs team is night and day compared to previous times. So.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to observe that one of the big fights when we were putting this whole thing together was the issue of design, build, operate. I think the wisdom of that from a public perspective has been much evidenced by the fact that we've been able to rely on the contractor. But I think there are design flaws, unfortunately, we're living with. They should have caught those. They didn't. We're living with the consequences. But at least when something fails, it's their nickeled, basically, right?
To an extent, right. There are provisions. Yeah, there are provisions within the contract that WDCWA would have some costs incurred for some of these events.
We are skating on real thin ice here. I mean, when you don't have backup for your water plant, I mean, it's thank God we still got wells in these towns. But it really concerns me. Do we have storage out there for diesel, or do we have to bring a tanker in?
So they would be rolling it in from Ramos or another vendor. They would roll. Actually, they did. They set it up, and they were getting deliveries. With the smaller one, they were getting deliveries every 8 hours into that tank.
I'm glad ours.
Yeah.
I won't say.
So on the note of reliability, the last bullet on the slide. We, based on the last event that we had with the generator, WDCWA undertook the effort to produce a DER system and design a DER system which includes battery and solar backup. So in about a year and a half, maybe, when we have this installed, the plant will no longer have shutdowns of this nature. You will have a battery, industrial-sized battery, that will provide probably 4 hours at a minimum of a backup. That would provide any amount of time necessary. If the generator needs to run, they have plenty of time to get out there and figure out what's going on. So that is something we're moving forward. We're almost done with preliminary design, and then we're actually talking with Jacobs in the beginning of October to see about implementing and how we want to deliver that project.
Do we have any problem for the air quality district about running this diesel for 19 days?
That is also, it might be on my next slide actually. might be on my next slide is yes, we did exceed the 200 hours by permit. Ken with Jacobs is addressing that with the airport.
Thank you.
Excellent question. Georgia Stollard?
Shut up.
No, great.
Or you'll
I
address it,
was
but
going to
yeah.
say a couple things. Did you have something? Okay. Yeah, no, Stan, what is the financing situation on this microgrid?
So we have applied for the grant basically to fund the majority of it. We don't have an answer yet at this point, but I'm hopeful. I mean, we've been very fortunate, like with the wastewater plant for Davis. It's a pretty straightforward program with PG&E or with SGIP. It's actually not PG&E, but it's the oversight board with PG&E, yeah, basically. So
competitive grant. It's something that jurisdictions.
So yeah, it's not a competitive grant. There is funding. I mean, obviously they have to have the funds available to do it, but I haven't seen any challenges with it. We're doing it here in the city with a few other projects as well.
So with the balance that we need, that year and a half timeline that you gave, are we able to implement in some incremental fashion without that balance? Or we're going to need to come up with that money? Once
we understand a little more on the costs, I think it's going to be a matter of looking in the bank. You know, we have some reserves within the fund. So, and then our next budget cycle, you know, we always have the reimbursement in quarter two. That may be something that maybe we talk about not doing this year. And we keep those funds from each of the cities to help augment whatever we're going to need for this. But at this point, I don't see us with a significant capital load. But we'll see what comes forward.
So you're optimistic that
I
in
am.
a year and a half actually we'll have the battery in place?
I would love it. I'm always optimistic.
Yeah.
The more realist over on this side.
Yeah.
But I would say we're
white,
progressing
Sam.
quick. Yeah.
The reason I ask is I feel like this is something that I'm sure jurisdictions have been made aware that this is going on. I know you've spoken to Davis City Council.
Yes.
But also, this is the kind of thing where if there's shortfalls, it seems like a very high priority
Yes.
for all the jurisdictions, and maybe there's some dollars we can dig up here and there. Obviously, last resort, but I feel like
Yeah.
this is critical. And, on one end, it's critical basic need to have backup energy supply. On the other hand, I'm assuming this is one of the first microgrid projects anywhere for a water agency. I don't know. Is it?
It's a great question. I don't know that we've looked. From a consultant perspective, who we're working with West Yost to do the design. I don't know that they've poked at. I mean, there's a lot of agencies that have batteries.
Yeah.
The idea around microgrid and being able to integrate all that, that's not as common. Usually you see that more large utility scale,
Yeah.
not to the plant level.
Right.
So that's a bit newer from just a plant perspective.
Okay, yeah. Well, as you get closer to, your hope-for timeline, is that...
Sure.
I would just reach out to the jurisdictions and just make sure that, just to cover your bases a little bit and make sure we don't get too close and finding that we don't have enough money, so...
Absolutely.
One more thought?
Yes, Director.
I would respectfully suggest you also talk to Mitch at Valley Clean Energy. We're putting together a microgrid in the Cape Bay Valley, and I think it's the first in the county.
Yeah.
I've actually talked to Mitch about this and City of Davis projects.
Yeah.
So he's definitely in the mix because they have their goals that they're looking to achieve, obviously from VCE, and some of those could absolutely dovetail with what we're looking at, both as Woodqua and as each individual city. I actually gave them Tim's as contact for Woodland, by the way. So
Stan, one of the interesting things about this job is that some things seem really oversold in public policy and some things seem really undersold. And what you're trying to do here, frankly, seems undersold to the jurisdictions in the sense of like, this is something very exciting and very innovative. And I feel like more people should be talking about it. And that might help down the line in terms of funding. So.
Noted. I sense an update to council in the near future from me. Okay.
Thanks. Do you have more for us on this? Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I just, we talked about air quality, so that's the 200 hours, so we're looking to address that. And then, like I said, Division of Drinking Water with the State Board, we did, because we went below 20, we did proactively notify them. They have asked, hey, would you mind updating your O&M plans, to make sure that you've addressed those things, so we are doing that. Jacobs with Woodqua is doing the same thing, so. But we wanted to proactively let them know. We didn't want them to get a call and then call us and say what's going on, that type of thing. So, yeah. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Fine.
On that last slide, what are the risks involved with that on the first one? Like you're putting it together, what development led to address mitigation efforts, what does that look like? I mean, do we understand is the air quality management district going to come down and say you're fined or you have to do something? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I can answer that because I actually talked with Jeff Pino over at the AQMD a couple of weeks ago when we got the call that said we were going to get a notice of violation. Basically, they don't directly, we're going to get a notice of violation in the mail at some point, but it doesn't come with a fine along with it. Then what we do is we go meet with them, and it seems like one of the thing that's more critical for them, and this is like the second time that we've overran our 200 hours, and they seem to be most upset that the plant did not call them ahead of time. Which kind of makes sense from an operational standpoint. If the plants, if they're trying to keep water to the cities, that's your first priority, not necessarily calling them. So what we'll have to do is we're putting together documentation of all the things that we have been doing over the past couple of years that Stan was just talking about, basically to mitigate our power problems that we've had, and with the DER thing, and they weren't even aware that we're doing all that. So I think we'll be ultimately okay. It's going to take a meeting or two and probably a long letter to them, saying that we actually are actively mitigating it. By the way, we're critical infrastructure. We can't just exactly turn the plant off for 2 weeks and not provide water. That's not an option for us. So I don't think we'll even have to go to their board to discuss it. I think we'll be able to work it out at staff level with them.
Thanks for your question, Director Chapman. And if we do need to mitigate, let's try to adopt mitigation measures that are more, real than Caltrans is.
Yes.
Great. Do we have any public comment? Doesn't look like anybody is out there. Do we have any written or messages? No. Great. Let's move on to the next agenda item on approving a purchase agreement for the winter water transfer.
Yeah, so this is basically our insurance policy for winter. As we've talked at several board meetings in the past, that every year we get to fall, Term 91 is still in effect. our CVP water rate ends on October 31, whether or not we use all the water. So we find ourselves in the position every fall that come November 1, do we have water or do we not? So what we've been doing is we've been doing water transfer agreements with the Southside Water District for the past several years, basically as an option contract where we pay them $50,000 to reserve water for us. And then if I call them on November 1, they have water for us, essentially. So this agreement before you today is identical to the one that we did last year. It is a bit less expensive than the one we did 2 years ago because we were paying $100,000 back then, and now we're paying $50,000 for the option. One thing to note is the state had one comment on the permit application package. We had requested 20 cubic feet per second because it's a nice round number. We usually use around 12. And their only comment, they came back and wanted to cap us at 15. So I don't know why it matters, but we said, okay, to that one. And then that's really it for this one. The only other caveat is the state hasn't finally signed off on the permit yet. They will. That was the only comment that they had. It's just that they know they don't have to do it until the end of October. So that will happen eventually.
Comments from directors on this item? Discussion? Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution 2024-4?
I think it's a great thing, and I appreciate the staff for the very forward-looking and comprehensive scan that's been taken to come up with this recommendation and its previous ones. Thank you.
Apologies. Before we go to the motion itself, is there any public comment that was written or no? Great. Okay, so we have a motion from Director Stollard. Do we have a second?
No, second.
Director Chapman seconds. Do we have any discussion? Great. Can I hear ayes for this?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do I hear nays, abstains? The adoption of the resolution is approved 3-0. Move on to number 5 on the agreement with WAPA for installation of new meter.
Okay, I can explain this one as well. So we've been sharing the meter at the intake with RD 2035 since the agency began operations back in 2016 over there. So there's a couple of things. One was switching over the water treatment plant to WAPA Power. There are certain charges that there's certain annual charges, they're monthly charges, but we split them with RD 2035 at the intake, and then we will also be responsible for them at the water treatment plant. So if we did nothing, we would essentially be paying annual charges times 1.5. So the thinking was we would just get our own meter there and then not have to do that anymore. It would be either cost equal or maybe a bit beneficial to us. One other thing that we found out is that back in 2014, there should have been an assignment of WAPA Power from RD 2035 to us. Some point along the way that never happened, and WAPA needs us to put in our own meter in order to not have to do this assignment, which is apparently some really long, drawn-out process that they would have to do. So they actually cut the price. They quoted us first around $75,000, $77,000 for the new meter. You see in the agreement, it's exactly $50,000. No, they actually reduced the price, I think, to kind of help incentivize us to go ahead with it and not do this other assignment process.
1,000, such a bargain for a meter.
Yes. It's a big meter, and they'll install it, they maintain it, and operate it. But one thing that this does require then is we have a operating agreement with RD 2035 that was signed back in 2014. We will have to amend that agreement. There's a section of that agreement that talks exactly about how you split the power bill every month and every single line item on that power bill. Ultimately, it'll be simplified because we're not splitting the power bill entirely there anymore. But the annual charges we will have to work out, and we just got email today from WAPA on what they're going to be for next year. And then the other component to it is the common facilities. RD will pay for their pumps, we will pay for our pumps, but somebody has to pay for the lights and the screen cleaner and a few other little things. So we'll have to work out, we're still trying to track down on whose meter they will land on. Is it on ours or on RD's? So we'll work that out. And then we've already met with RD 2035. We think we have a framework of how we will amend the agreement, but we just got the final numbers in today. And so we'll work through that. And then basically how do we split up the costs over there going forward, and that'll come back to the board as a future item. We're not trying to make RD 2035 any worse off, but we're not trying to take on any more expenses than we have to ourselves. So we'll work that out. We have an agreement that we can work through the numbers and make something that works for everyone.
Do we have separate electric panels in that pump house?
Yes, downstream of the meter we do.
And how many of the screens are there? 5 or 6?
There's 10 screens altogether.
Well, can we wire 5 to one panel and 5 to the other? And
No,
that's too easy?
that's too easy. So on the downstream side of the screens is basically just a big gallery full of water. And then we have 4 pumps on the outside of the screens, and RD has 5 pumps on the inside of the screens. We do that intentionally because they only operate seasonally, and we operate year-round, and you're trying to balance the flow through the screen as equally as you can.
Okay.
So it's kind of, set up on opposite sides.
It's more complicated than my simple mind would comprehend.
Other questions or comments from directors? Do we have any comment previously received on this? Great. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-5? Director Chapman, Director Stollard, seconds. Do I have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All in against? Abstain? The resolution passes 3-0. We can move on to item number 6.
All right, so the next item is another contract with WAPA. This is the back-to-back contract, which is the agreement to use PG&E's power lines to transmit power from WAPA to us. And that's something that we need. We're still using PG&E's power lines to get the power from WAPA's system to ours. You notice that there is not a rate schedule in there yet. WAPA is still negotiating with PG&E and what the rates are going to be. So the agreement basically says we will pay the rates according to the rates schedule when they work them out. They're meeting in October. They've been arguing back and forth quite a bit. So hopefully soon that's completed. But it will have the same rates as everybody else that's a WAPA customer. The other 88 customers will be the same as us.
Move approval of the item, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion from Director Stoller. Do we have a second? I'll second. Do we have any? Yes, sorry about that. Do we have any comments previously received? Okay, great. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All against? All abstain? No? Okay. Motion passes 3-0. Let's move on to the long-range board calendar.
So it looks like the next thing we have for the board is our meeting is planned for January 16, 2025.
Nothing else? Great.
Nope, that's it.
Okay. In Woodland. Do we have any comments from board members? No comments.
Continuing appreciation for all our staff does. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Directors Stoller and Chapman. Thanks, staff. And we are adjourned.
Damn, you're good.